Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Thank you very much. Since yesterday, we've had a very useful interaction with the CBDT and the field formations with the Principal Commissioner of Income Tax in the morning. Officials of the CBDT were all with us. Post that, we also had a interaction again with the CBIC through the board members being with us and also the principal chief commissioners. So the morning we had a lot of interactive communication with officials dealing with income tax and other direct tax issues. And in the afternoon, it was on customs and GST related issues. It was a good blend of senior officials and absolute freshers as well. So it was a free interaction with the Revenue Secretary obviously speaking. I also spoke, but they were an open session also, wherein irrespective of the number of years in service, we had inputs coming from officials who were at various levels in the field, as they say. Post that, in the evening yesterday, we had a high tea and again a closed door. In that the media was not present there. Interaction with the industry leaders. If that was yesterday, today in the morning I've had a detailed annual review with the public sector banks and their chiefs. Again, there was a free interactive session with the Secretary, Department of Financial Services, Debashish Panda, being with me. He also was accompanied by Pankaj Jain and also Amit Agarwal, additional secretaries from the ministry. There again, there was a detailed discussion. Each of the banks together have given me through the IBA presentation on where all of their performances. In fact, after that, we had a detailed interactive session where both Debashish and myself have very clearly laid out the picture of the government's various schemes which are going on, particularly after the second wave, and also sort of reviewing what was announced through the Atmanirbhar Bharat, several announcements, how the banks have taken it all forward. And now, post the second wave, the announcements which have been made, we would like the banks also to have their role to take it forward to the sections for whom they are designed and aimed at. Over and above that, clearly, I've requested the banks to have at various regional levels interaction with export promotion agencies, with the chambers of commerce and industry, so that the requirement of exporters can all be timely, well addressed, and between public sector banks there should be some kind of a simple but yet a uniform approach, so that exporters are not made to run between one bank and another, scouting to see where the offer is better. So public sector banks have all been requested to have that interaction, not just with the export-oriented industries, but also with their chambers and with their Federation of Indian Exporters Organization, the FIO. Other than that, both Debashish Panda and myself have highlighted the fact that today's nature of banking is also changing. We see even from industry inputs that people are able to raise finances even outside of the banking system. Several decades post-independence, India has depended only through the banks funds which businesses would want to have. Now, industry themselves recognize that they have avenues outside of the banks, in that they are able to go to the market and raise enough revenues. Even our banks themselves have raised revenues from the markets. So there was a bit of a discussion on those avenues also to be understood by the banks and focus on how they can extend credit to wherever it is required. In that, we've also, just as we placed emphasis on the export-oriented industries, we've underlined the fact that Prime Minister has been emphasizing all over the country that there should be by district an identification of such goods which can be found to have great export potential. And that is why you had this one district, one product. In Uttar Pradesh, only a few days ago, I had gone, and both the SIDBI and the Exim Bank were with me to carry that forward in the name of Ubarte Sitare, where you identify champions within that particular chosen sector and help them to do everything it takes for exporting the products. In that, credit will be given, assistance will be provided for technology infusion, and also hand-holding will happen for export of products. So I've requested all the banks all over the country to work with state governments and ensure that by district, that one district, one product also gets benefit from the banks. SIDBI and Exim Bank together are also helping in providing cluster facilitation for such things, and also providing common infrastructure which will be required by these export potential manufacturers who are largely in small and medium areas, but for them to have a common infrastructure within that district as is required by that product manufacturer, banks can also play a role. We have highlighted that. Other than that, I have, from the inputs that I've received from the industry, from the input I've received from the direct taxation and indirect taxation field formations, we understand that a lot of sunrise sectors require a lot of banking assistance. And identifying these sunrise sectors, I've asked the banks to extend themselves to understand what will be their financial requirement and try facilitating them. Fintech is one of the areas in which banks are doing quite a lot of work. I've highlighted to them that there are two aspects. One, of course, for the banks themselves to have the benefit of technology being used, and another, fintech as a sector itself also requires a lot of assistance. I've asked banks to please look at that area as well and approach through various other information systems that they may have such people who are already furthering their businesses, but that is one of the ways in which we can provide greater stimulus. And lastly, about the banks, I've also requested banks to come up with specific plans for the Northeast so that businesses and requirements of the Northeast states, not one plan for all the 8 states, but to each according to their requirement, so that the logistics in the Northeast, so that exports from the Northeast, Prime Minister has emphasized again for the organic fruits and vegetables and the products which come out of the Northeast, which can find markets all over, for the banks also to make sure that that will happen. There is again a matter of concern which banks themselves have recognized, that in the eastern states, be it Orissa, be it Bihar, be it Jharkhand, and somewhat even for that matter West Bengal, where CASA deposits are actually piling up. And banks should now, as much as possible, also give that facility in that region for greater credit expansion. It's one thing to receive deposits, smaller, medium-sized deposits from that region, from the people who are living in that region, but to have a plan which is so desperately needed so that credit flow for business development in those regions can also be better promoted. So, whilst the situation in the western and southern regions of the country, CASA is there, credit requirement is also there, so you are able to utilize that, earn better, and also give in better terms for the credit requirement, but that's not so much happening in the eastern and particularly the several states of eastern region. So these were elaborately discussed. I also repeat something which was said earlier. Collectively, public sector banks have all done well. They've come out of the PCA. Today, they are able to show clear profits. And individually, too, several banks have done very well. They've also shown that they are now in a position to go to the market and raise monies for their growth capital requirements. So today, you find the Indian public sector banks, even though they were going through the pandemic, even though they were extending all facilities for all the DBT beneficiaries and so on, through the Bank Mitra, and that is one thing on which I have repeatedly given credit to the banks for having undertaken these kind of work during the pandemic. The amalgamation work, which happened just prior to the pandemic, have not suffered because their attention has gone to serving during the pandemic. They have completed the process. Today, all banks are sufficiently endowed, and the processes of amalgamation has not let any customer to suffer. Seamlessly, the amalgamations have all happened, and most of the banks are comfortably reporting on the amalgamation related information. So we also launched the EASE, which is the Easy Access and Service Excellence, which was launched after 2015 when Prime Minister had addressed the banks through, what was that called? Gyan Sangam. In 2015, when Prime Minister addressed through the Gyan Sangam all the banks and also spoke about details about how professional they should become, how they can improve on their service experience for the customers and so on. Since then, without any gap, EASE has been launched 1.0, then 2.0, 3.0, and for each one of them a report has been given about how the outcomes are. Banks have improved the customer experiences. Today we launched EASE 4.0. Even that has been achieved by the banks. So I'm glad. There is one announcement which I would want Debashish to himself say, which pertain to the benefits, pensionary benefits and so on. Debashish.
So this is in continuation of the 11th bipartite settlement, which was signed by the IBA with the unions on 11/11/2020 on wage revision. So from it, there was a proposal for enhancement in the family pension and also the employer's contribution under the national pension scheme. So this has also been approved by the Honorable Finance Minister, and the benefits would now accrue to the family pensioner. Earlier, the scheme had slabs of 15, 20 and 30% of the pay that the pensioner drew at that point of time, and it was capped subject to a maximum of 9,284 rupees. So that was a very paltry sum, and Madam Finance Minister was very much concerned and wanted that this should be revised so that they get a decent amount to survive and sustain. So now the cap has been completely removed, and a uniform slab of 30% of the pay that the employee was receiving will be entitled to them as the family pension. So it could go up to as high as 35,000 rupees per family. So that is the first one. The second change that has been brought about is that the employer was contributing 10% by way of contribution to the NPS corpus. 10% was coming from the employee and 10% was being given by the employer. Now this 10% of the employer has been enhanced to 14%, which means a 40% rise in the pension contribution from the banks for the employees. So these are two very significant changes that have been made, and the Government of India, Finance Minister has already approved this, and these benefits would be available to these employees with this change. Thank you.
So I'll add one more bit about the meetings that I've had with the CBDT and with the CBIC and the field formations from the Mumbai region. I was immensely grateful to the customs that during the corona pandemic, they had, without taking any rest, seamlessly moved goods which were coming in to meet the requirements of the hospitals and also the importers. And on that, the customs worked tirelessly, and I put on record, which I did before them as well, my appreciation for the way in which customs had worked 24/7, and we hadn't had any complaints coming from anyone saying no, customs is sitting over our, goods which have been imported and so on. So customs, I did mention that particularly I'm very thankful. Similarly, the GST officials, you'll all recollect that in the last several months, the collection has been kept up, the momentum has been maintained. We've all through maintained on an average over 1 lakh rupees collection per month. And that couldn't have been possible unless the GST officials had, worked very hard, and they did. And therefore, there was a word of praise for that. And the new normal, as would the Revenue Secretary would say, will probably be in the range of 1,10,000 per month on an average. And the officers were quite enthused, and I'm grateful for that. The CBDT as well has been working very hard, and the direct taxation collection, more importantly, both the GST and the direct taxation have plugged a lot of loopholes, as a result of which the collections have improved, the GST particularly. Several instances of gaming the system have all been identified by using the technology available to them. In both the cases, and as is also in the case of the banks, there was a great sense of feeling sad, and condolence was expressed by all of us for all those staff members who have been affected, families who have lost their breadwinner in many cases. Our colleagues who were affected have all succumbed to the COVID, and even that was one of the things on which all of us have expressed deep condolences, and among ourselves made sure that the pensionary and other pension benefits which have to reach these people and their families will be, and as it is, several of them have already got it, but we shall be looking into helping them so that none of the families have to run from pillar to post, and we shall facilitate that. These are my opening remarks. If anything is to be added at this stage by you, Tarun.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. We will open the floor for questions. We will start from table 1. You can briefly introduce yourself and then.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Yash Jain from CNBC TV18. Ma'am, you spoke about amalgamation and how that was a smooth process, hence leading to the question that what's the status on the bank privatization as well as insurance privatization? How far has it reached? If you could give some clarity in terms of who could be the candidates and the conclusion timeline. And one question, ma'am, various weather predicting agencies have said that the monsoons could be below normal. Ma'am, you've been analyzing that situation. What kind of impact do you assess as far as the economy is concerned at this juncture, as well as onto banks when it comes to the credit in those areas in that particular section?
As and when I'm ready to answer on the banks privatization, I will answer. So at this stage, there's nothing for me to say on that, which is your first question. Second question is on the monsoon. The monsoon is still on. Sometimes monsoon in some parts has been erratic. There has been excess rain till 2 days before there would have been a shortfall. Delhi, for instance, had nearly a 60% shortfall, which was all made up and went on to the surplus mode within a matter of 6 hours of rain. So at this stage, I think it will be a bit too much for any one of us to safely assess the impact of the monsoon. I'll wait to see it for a bit longer. But monsoon or otherwise, we can see the revival happening, about which I've already mentioned once before. We'll wait for the signals to be even more clearer. But one thing which I further will add, other than the Atmanirbhar announcements and the second announcement after the second wave, I've asked the banks, if you would remember, there was a credit outreach which we did in 2019, where banks went over to all the districts in the country and extended all kinds of credit to meet the demand requirements. And many of them probably did more than proportionately serve the RAM costs, which is the retail, which is agriculture, and which is also the MSME related loans. If that was the outcome, in fact, in Parliament also I had answered a question that between October 2019 and March 2021, nearly approximately 4.94 lakh crores which were distributed during this credit outreach between October and March, October 19 and March 21. This year too, from a date which will be determined sometime in October, which the Secretary DFS will announce a bit later, talking to all the banks. However, there will be a credit outreach even this year in every district of the country. And banks would go to have the credit outreach conducted the way they conducted earlier. And also, you would remember that after the second wave, we had announced through the MFIs, microfinance institutions, credit to be given up to a top ceiling of 1.5 lakhs, for which the NBFCs will also help the MFIs to reach out. I understand good progress is being made on that. Debashish will probably brief. So, in order to keep up the momentum of stimulus that we are periodically giving, we've also asked the banks to move out there and give people who would want to borrow from them for any one of their requirements. Anything else you want to add?
Yes, now Tarun from Money Control. I would request everyone to kindly confine to one question. After that, if we have time, we can have a second round.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Tarun from Money Control. My question is on the stock market side, ma'am. You have announced last year the direct overseas listing. What is the status now? Ma'am, we are hearing that you are making the mandatory listing in IFSC if you are going for the direct overseas listing. Is this the plan, ma'am?
I'd ask Tarun to answer on it.
The direct listing is under consideration of the government. Because to make it a success, there would be some requirements of amendments in some legislations to ensure that there's a smooth trading of these securities outside the territory of India. So we'll wait, and we are in discussion with the players who are asking for this, and maybe in the budget session we'll see what we can do. But at this point of time, it will suffice to say that it is under discussion. And there are some issues which we need to sort out before we can allow. We can allow them, but it should also be a success. For that, we want all the hurdles to be taken care of.
Is it mandatory for IFSC listing?
As of now, there is no such thing. But when the regulations and the rules come out, you'll get to know. But at this point of time, there is no such compulsion that is being thought of.
Okay, Tamanna from ET Now.
Thank you, ma'am. This is Tamanna and Amdar here from ET Now. So the first question, ma'am, is that in your review with public sector banks and their performance, what is your assessment of the success of all the schemes that you've announced for relief to COVID-hit companies and borrowers? There were a flurry of schemes that you announced, up to 6 lakh crore rupees in total, if I'm not mistaken. Were you satisfied with the kind of outreach, especially to certain sections, like you had announced scheme for hawkers, for tourist guides, and extremely hit vulnerable sections? Are you satisfied with the progress there?
On one particular thing, I would straight tell you, on the hawkers. In some regions, we've had very good, success in reaching out to as many possible. And in some other areas, it could be better, is my understanding. And in that, a lot depends not just on the banks. The local authorities would have recognized these hawkers in a particular street or a main street. Unless the recognition is given by the local authority, the banks wouldn't be in a position to extend the facility. So there is a lot more interaction which is happening between the banks and the local authorities, because it is the local authority who recognizes and identifies a hawker in a particular area. So in such cases where there are a bit of a work yet to be completed by the local bodies, we are waiting for them to do it. But otherwise, where these details are available for KYC's purpose, yes, it's moving on fast. But Devashish, what do you want to add?
In fact, the scheme is doing very well. More than 26 lakh disbursements have happened, and about 29 to 30 lakhs have been sanctioned. The high point in this scheme is that they are all, as ma'am said, they are registered with the urban local bodies. So the vendors, their whereabouts are known. Number two, they are getting onboarded electronically also, so that if they are selling their produce or they are selling the stuff, then they can pay through a QR code. So these are two main features of the scheme, and more than 2,500 crores, 2,600 crores have already been disbursed. So it's moving on very steadily, and it's making good progress.
Ma'am, but my question was a wider one. Do you think that for sectors which have been hit specifically, tourism, etc. Yeah.
Tourism guide, the scheme is actually being designed by the Ministry of Tourism. Although the announcements have been made and necessary financial provisions have been made. So the moment the Tourism Ministry finalizes that, the banks will be they are in a position to start the lending.
There too, if you recall, there too, guides who have the central government's identity cards as well as those who have identity cards given by the states are included in the program. So there's a need for coordination between the two, but that will happen sooner. So it's actually not in the ground affected as yet.
May I just take the liberty, ma'am? Because the NMP scheme that you announced earlier this week.
What is that?
The National Monetization Pipeline scheme that you announced earlier this week has been the big talking point, and there are a lot of comments that have come in on it as well. Some from the opposition also saying that this is, giving away of assets and crony capitalists will get them. Will there be a transparent process? Would you have any response to this?
I'll certainly have a response to that. I wish the opposition questions with some homework done. Who actually monetized the Mumbai-Pune corridor? Was it not the Congress party? Was it not under the Congress party, which was headed by and is even now being headed by Srimati Sonia Gandhi? 8,000 odd crores was raised by that. New Delhi railway station. Who called for the RFP on it? Was it not the Congress party? Somewhere between 2008, 5, something like that? New Delhi railway station. RFP call for was made 27/10/2008. 2008. Who was the Prime Minister then? Who was the Finance Minister then? And I would definitely ask Shri Rahul Gandhi, who, even when the Prime Minister was abroad, when he thought one of the ordinances was so outrageous, he tore it up in front of the media. Did he tear this RFP call for the New Delhi railway station to be monetized? Did he tear this out? If he indeed is against monetization, why wasn't the RFP for monetizing New Delhi railway station torn to pieces by Shri Rahul Gandhi? Is this not monetization? And if this is monetization, then did they sell off the railway, New Delhi railway station? Is it owned by Jijaji now? Does he understand what is monetization? And I took the pains even then for, if I may now admit, the sake of the former president of Congress party, because monetization may probably mean something to him, that we are not selling off. There will be a strict handing back. I said it, and I'm sure many in your media friends will remember that those were words which I uttered. So Congress party can every now and then come up with, oh, you're selling off the country, selling. That's something which they are very good at. They sold air, they sold water, they sold land, they sold mines, and made a lot of kickback with it. From 2014, I challenge, if there's been even an allegation, a whisper of allegation against Prime Minister Modi's government. So to lead people to believe something which is not true, to mislead people. I can give you more examples. Examples of those asset monetizations which happened during Congress period. Please ask him to take it all out and then explain it before you if that meant selling of those properties. The monetization pipeline that was announced by me day before yesterday, 2 days ago, there is no change of ownership. The ownership is still with Government of India. They are brownfield assets which are almost completed but are underutilized. If government has to utilize it better, it has to be put through monetization process wherein it will be put to effective use with a bit more addition to spruce it up or to bring it up to the level of utilization. So this is absolutely the obvious. You in the media, particularly those who handle the business and finance and everything else, do understand it. I'm sure you will be able to ask the Congress party about the way in which they jump into conclusions and charge the government about, oh, you're selling away everything which has been built 70 years over. Something like that he did say. 70 years over they built. And what did happen during the Commonwealth Games? Within one Commonwealth Games, they finished all that which can be creamed out into the accounts of their cronies. That is their business, not the government of Prime Minister Modi's.
Madam, just a follow-up to that.
Excuse me. Yes.
I would like to have him guide me.
Let us. We need to give chance to everyone. Yeah.
नमस्ते मैम, सबसे पहले तो आपका धन्यवाद देना चाहेंगे। मुंबई में आप हमसे मुखातिब होते हैं, दिल्ली से में होते हैं, मुंबई के मीडिया वालों के पास कभी मौका मिलता है। मैम, जिस तरह से बजट में आपने ऐतिहासिक ऐलान किया था सरकारी बैंक और इंश्योरेंस कंपनी का, तो उसका जो प्रोसेस है वो एक साथ ही होगा आगे चल के, क्योंकि जो कर्मचारी है उनके अंदर काफी ज्यादा घबराहट है और जो कंपनी बच जाएगी सरकारी इंश्योरेंस के अंदर, वहाँ पे कुछ थोड़ी बहुत और पूंजी डाली जाएगी। तो जिस तरह से भारत के इंश्योरेंस सेक्टर की दुनिया भर में काफी चर्चा हो रही है, आपके मार्गदर्शन में कोविड से जुड़े प्रोडक्ट लॉन्च किए गए, 30,000 करोड़ तक का क्लेम आया है, लेकिन पिछले 4 महीने से जो इंश्योरेंस रेगुलेटर है उसका जो पद है वो खाली पड़ा है, चेयरमैन नहीं है, पॉलिसी डिसीजन पूरी तरह से रुके हुए हैं, तो कब तक अपॉइंटमेंट हो जाएगा? तो क्या टेलीकॉम सेक्टर के लिए भी कुछ आप
एक ही करके पूछिए ना, इतना सारा
हम कम मौका मिलता है तो थोड़ा एक्साइटमेंट
नहीं। इंश्योरेंस सेक्टर का विषय में एक इस विषय में, इस संदर्भ में मैं explain करना चाहती हूँ. Can I do it in English? Are you okay? See, I would like to put some facts before you so that through you I can explain the situation. You had during the budget a public enterprise policy announced, wherein we had identified certain sectors as being strategically important, strategic sectors, and in them a bare minimum presence of the government will in any case be there always. Banks and financial institutions and insurance in it are identified as strategic sectors, which means in insurance, for instance, the government's minimum presence will be there. Life insurance, general insurance, and reinsuring agencies. These are the three categories broadly in which insurance firms are there, both in the private and in the public sector. Therefore, if minimum presence is something which is as per policy got to be there, I'll obviously be present in LIC. I'll obviously be present somewhat in general insurance and somewhat in the reinsurance also. But over and above a bare minimum presence, if there is a need for me to identify those which are there but probably not necessary for my bare minimum presence, I'll obviously think in terms of either, amalgamating them or disinvesting in them and so on. So, if this broad framework is understood, you then understand why we are announcing an IPO for LIC. It's an IPO, right? But even for me to do some disinvestment, keeping my minimum presence in this area, I still need to do some changes in the law. I will have to do it. And specifically when the question is related to, employees ke man mein ghabrahat, I want through you to tell employees, please no, don't have any ghabrahat. The government understands that we will have to take care of the workers. And that's been the approach. That's been the approach in every one of the disinvestment we have taken up. So I want you to be clear about which are those sectors in which strategically, because of the policy itself, bare minimum of the government presence will be there. Thank you.
Okay. Abhijit.
Telecom sector.
Excuse me, let us have this question from here.
This is Abhijit from Business Standard. During the RBI had announced COVID loan policy. How is the banks have given any feedback on how much collectively they have given? They were basically targeted on the families which were troubled, especially after the second wave.
You want to answer that? Do you want to repeat your question?
RBI had announced a COVID loan policy. Have the banks given a feedback how much they have done?
Yes.
This is especially after the second wave.
So there are two schemes what RBI had announced, and we have also from the government topped it up with some guarantees, right? So one is for sprucing up the health infrastructure, creating and also upgrading, meaning greenfield projects, brownfield projects, and in all areas of health infrastructure, including vaccine manufacturing, and oxygen plants. So a whole range of things have been included in that. And the government has given a guarantee of 50% for the greenfield projects and 75% for the 75 for the greenfield and 50% for the brownfield. So the process has already started and banks have already received proposals. They are in the process of sanctioning. Some of the banks have already started sanctioning. And on 31st, we are having an outreach kind of a program or a conference with all the stakeholders, including various trade bodies and also the IMA, the Indian Medical Association, and other related organization. Honorable FM will also be chairing that meeting for a while, and we are trying to push this credit into that field. That is one. The second one is about the personal loan.
Is there an outcome?
There is also a traction in that. Yesterday we reviewed in details. So many of the banks have already started giving these personal loans, and Canara Bank, State Bank of India, the large 5 banks, even the smaller banks also, and it is picking up. So whatever was required, they have given. We are collecting those details, which we will share with the media.
Another was with regard to the one government-owned.
Sir, I think we will go to the next person. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I'm not sure my technology, sir. What is the government's plan to optimizing inflation?
The RBI has come out with a guidance on inflation, and RBI has said that the inflation, which is a little on the up, will cool down in some time. And we also feel that once the crops come out, the inflation should come down. I don't know whether your question was just on that or you were trying to... The strategy, I'll tell...
Yeah.
Sorry, ma'am. The strategy is that we have reduced our duties on a number of products which are edible oils, which is also pulses that we have reduced. So the major inflation that is happening is in these components that is happening. So we have reduced that duty. We have ensured extra pulses and edible oil coming from outside into the country so that the supply side is improved. So we are taking care of the important items on the consumer basket, and also the RBI has taken a few steps on its own to ensure that the inflation cools down. Our own estimation is that the inflation rate will remain between the band of 4% and 6%, which is what the Government of India has mandated RBI to maintain in the coming financial year.
And even now, if you look at the past several months, in fact, during Corona, when there were quite a lot of supply chain disruptions, even then we had maintained it well under 6. When it went up, it was for a few months, and through periodic meetings of the group of ministers, which monitors essential goods and their supply in the markets. We worked together with the states to ensure that there are no hoardings happening. And as a result of which, and also periodic, like the way Revenue Secretary has said, periodically opening up on imports for pulses, reducing the customs duty on them, we have managed to keep the supplies coming even where within the country the supply is not able to get a boost from its head. So as a result, you notice in the last month, the food inflation has definitely come down. We'll keep monitoring it and ensure that that is not going to be a cause for worry, even as we keep the momentum on stimulus.
Okay, now Mayur from Times of India.
Ma'am, Mayur Shetty from Times of India. You spoke about alternatives to banks for capital for business. And yesterday there was talk about allowing insurance bonds instead of bank guarantees. So wanted to know if government was in favor of public sector companies issuing credit substitutes as insurance, and also is the government willing to accept them in place of bank guarantees?
Well, that was a question asked by when we had this industry interaction, saying many of these guarantees, bank guarantees, are burdening the companies, and therefore would there be a way in which we can substitute that with any other form? So that was in response to a question raised. We'll have to work on it and come back, whilst we are not averse to the idea.
We understand you have a flight to catch. So would you like us to wind up?
There's a lady there. Why don't you allow girls to ask, women to ask?
Okay.
You've confined it all to this side, and now you're concluding it by saying you have a flight.
Hi, ma'am.
Do have a look at that side.
This is a report from Reuters. I just wanted to understand that now that you've reviewed the financial positions of the bank, if there are any plans for capital infusion in this financial year, and also if I may squeeze in another question, after the second wave, there's been a rise in bad loans, especially in the retail segment. I just wanted to understand if there were any discussions on that, and if there are any concerns regarding that? Thanks.
The first question is on capitalization of banks. I didn't get the second.
Please go ahead.
You were not speaking in the mic.
One was your question, first one on bank capitalization, and the second one was on the stressed businesses which are approaching the banks, if there's been any reportage on that, right?
More on, if there have been NPA, especially the retail.
Why do you keep the mic closer to you?
Sure. So I was saying that, there's been an increase in bad loans, especially in the retail segment. And if there have been any discussions around around this.
You want to say, Debashish?
As far as the capital requirement is concerned, we are happy to inform you that last year alone, the public sector banks went to the market because of the cleaning up of the balance sheet of the banks. And today, this morning also, the annual review went through all those issues. The banks have all turned profitable. More than 30,000 crores of rupees have been the net profit that the banks have earned. Besides, the capital adequacy is as high as almost 14%, contrary to the requirement of the regulator, which is around 10.875. The net NPAs have come down to 3.1% as against 9% 2 years ago. Similarly, the gross NPA from 15 has come down to below 8% now. So all these parameters have now given the confidence to the investors, and the banks have gone to the market and they have raised about 69,000 crores of rupees, including 10,000 crores of equity capital. So therefore, the capital requirement is being met by the bank themselves. And also, let me tell you, in the first 5 months of this financial year, more than 12,000 crores of rupees are already in the process of fundraising by the banks, and some have been completed and some QIP are in the process.
Okay, one more question we have.
Yeah, can I just squeeze in one more question? Ma'am, would like to get an update on the bad bank. In our interactions with banks, we were given to believe that by July, August, the license would be given to the ARC. But we also understand that the guarantees by the government, which was expected, is still not given or approved upon. So if you could tell us at what stage the bad bank is.
Well, I think they're very close to getting the licenses.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. The company, the NRCL, has already been registered, the National Asset Reconstruction Company. The IB has already gone to the RBI just 2 days ago, for the license. We expect that license to be coming soon. They have identified the assets which has to be transferred. The process of getting the intercreditor agreement also is on the works, so that by the time the license is obtained, they are in a position to transfer the assets. The CEO has been appointed, the staff has been put in place, and as far as the debt management company is concerned, that is also the company registration work is in the process, and that also should follow similarly in sync with the NARCL. So I think substantive work has been done as far as the credit, the guarantee part is concerned. That is not really a matter of concern. That is an extra comfort which the banks have asked for, which is under consideration with the government.
Yeah. Please use the mic. Please hold it close to you.
Ma'am, this is Shayan Ghosh from Mint newspaper. Despite these credit push schemes that you have announced in the last year, credit growth is still at about 6.5%. So do you think there is some sort of a demand, lack of demand for credit, and will that come in the way of your continued push or stimulus that you just spoke about?
Well, I think it's too early to conclude whether there is a lack of demand. We've been addressing the credit requirements of small and medium business in particular through various different ways. Banks have shown extreme nimbleness in reaching out and proving that those credit outreaches have reached these people. And even now, I'm telling banks to go ahead with the credit outreach from October. During the festive season, it is also natural for that to pick up. So I don't think it's time yet for us to conclude that there is no credit pickup. But even without waiting for indications, we have taken steps to ramp up further credit to reach people. And that is why that microfinance announcement was also made, and I understand from Devashish that that is already reaching the full amount exhaustion. Do you want to add on that?
Yes, basically this is another scheme where we wanted that the last mile borrower, the small borrower or the micro borrower easily gets money in order to invest that money in some income generating activity. So through the MFIs, by giving a guarantee, the government has ensured that 7,500 crores of rupees goes to the MFIs, and the MFIs are there operating in that small ecosystem, and they have a connect with the borrowers, they know their footprints. So we thought that is the easiest way we could reach that set of borrowers. So that work is also underway, and as ma'am said, more than about 10,000 crores worth of proposals have already come to the banks. The banks have already started the appraisal, and very quickly, I think within a month's time, they should be able to completely disburse to all the MFIs. The MFIs, on the other hand, have got some money and they've started lending to their borrowers. So the work is in progress, and we hope within a month or 45 days, the entire exercise should get completed.
With your permission, we will take one last question. Ashish?
Ma'am, this was with regard to a suggestion made by RBI to cut the duties on petroleum products as well from an inflation management perspective. Is there a look, because you have already looked at edible oils and pulses, is there any sort of look at it? You have previously mentioned that, okay, this is basically with the state governments, and also explained that there's a lot of pressure coming from the oil bonds payments. But there are concerns on the contrary which have been explained by some analysts on oil bonds specifically. So if you can just sort of elaborate on
bonds. On the oil bonds, those media personnel who were with me that day would know that I have very clearly given the details out on the oil bond with an intention of very clearly saying that those years about which the UPA government and the Congress party would normally speak, saying growth was at its best, 5, 6, 7, 8 before the international financial crisis. The economy was doing very well. At that time, for cutting down prices for the convenience of the end user, in those years, oil bonds have been issued. And that is why I deliberately use the word trickery. It is with that intention that I have explained it, saying, if you on the one hand are repeatedly showing data to say the economy was doing very well, and probably it was doing very well looking at the figures, did you have a need to do the trickery? You were reducing price, reduce it. No, but oil bonds were issued, and the burden was not on you because you didn't even show it in your budget. And then there is a government which comes later on to pay it. Borrowing is common for every government. I'm not saying no. But the context in which the oil bond was used and the way in which it was used, shown as extra budgetary or off budget, for some other government to come and pay it up, but you say we've reduced the price to the public. It is in that context I've very clearly said, and therefore said, servicing this trickery, my hands are tied. That's not to therefore say, oh, this, even today in one of the newspapers I saw a graph which showed it is just one drop of a huge drop in which there are several other things. You can be sure of one thing, if this government has to say things to you, it will say up front, like the way we've handled the budget 21. That which has to be in the budgetary document will be in the budgetary document. In fact, I've brought, for transparency's sake, things outside which have been kept under the carpet for a long time, even them on board. So then to say, oh no, really, oil bond doesn't really tie your hands up is a different story. 2005, 6, 7, 8, were they doing well or not? At least that's what we are often reminded about. And even in those years, you're not able to do honest giving of concession to the tax-paying public, the fuel users. That's trickery. And I repeat, that's trickery. And it is that which I explained. And also then said, in the context, because one of your comrades asked me that question, saying in Tamil Nadu they've reduced it by 3 rupees. I said, yes, I fully acknowledge. And I also said there was a white paper issued by that government much before the budget was presented this time. And I clearly made a statement, had only in 2014 the government, after winning the election and forming the government, released a white paper, many of these trickeries would have come out. It is in that context I've used it. I'm not going back on my word. I stand by it. It was trickery.
Ma'am, but is there not a case for reducing the pressure?
I think we should wind up.
On the petrol, fuel price matter, I've sufficiently said where it lies. It is not center versus state. It is something where both of us will have to sit and talk to see how best we can take it up.